Okay, I guess we're live. Good morning or hello, depending on your time zone. I'm continuing on my 90-day challenge in Arabic and Farsi. And so every day as I do my different learning activities, I think about what I'm doing and different aspects of what I'm doing, which I want to share with you. And so what I have been doing recently in my Arabic, and again, basically till about noon today is Arabic, and then I switched to Farsi. So half my week is Arabic, half my week is Farsi. And I explained last time that I'm sort of in this stage now where I kind of more or less comfortable doing easy content. I really struggle to do difficult content. So I kind of go back and forth. I think, there was recently a blog post that went on my blog where I talked about, in an ideal world, you're always progressing from content that's just a little bit too difficult for you, but in fact, it's very difficult, or it's not very practical to expect that you can always find content that is both interesting and just that little next bit, that next level of difficulty for you. Besides which, as in the title today, language learning is a fuzzy process. I don't really understand the concept of fuzzy logic in computing, but it sort of, it involves the idea that not everything is a matter of true or false, right or wrong. In traditional language learning, it's right or wrong. We have a test, we get 8 out of 10, or we get 6 out of 10. In fact, those things that we got right on the test, we might get wrong the next time. Words that we remembered for the test, we may forget the next time. Things that we got wrong, we might get right the next time. The same is true when we speak. We make mistakes that we may not make the next time. It's not a logical progression step by step. So, even I was thinking too of the books that I have bought to help me in Arabic. So I bought Asimil. I paid someone to transcribe it and put it on LingQ. I bought this thing. It's a very cheap one. It's like $10. It's about Montreal at the bookstore, and it's Méthode Express. It's not bad. And I also bought this other one, Manuel de l'Arabe Moderne. All three of them I paid someone in Jordan to transcribe so that I could upload them into LingQ, because it's extremely difficult, at least at the beginning, to read in Arabic. This way I can look up words as I go. I can hear the text-to-speech. However bad the text-to-speech is, it doesn't matter, because I then hear the native voice and I get a good sense of how the word is pronounced. But all of these, they sort of say, here, Asimil says, if you do all the 77 lessons, you'll be at B2 or something. And the idea is that as you progress through the book, you are, firmly acquiring all this knowledge of the language, which isn't the case. I find that if I go back to the early lessons, I've forgotten a lot of the stuff that was there. It's not a matter of sort of building blocks. It's a matter of gradual exposure. And therefore, I find myself always going back to the lessons that I did before and kind of roaming around into more difficult stuff, roaming back into easier stuff. So that this is sort of a gradual process of osmosis. We're never quite sure what we retain. So that makes the whole process to me fuzzy. I should also point out that since I had some books here, I also grabbed, I find that any language, verbs are key. So if I can get a simple book that focuses in on the most common verbs, I feel if I can get a handle on the most common verbs, I got the same in Farsi and Persian, as I'm going to call it now. Verbs are kind of key. That's why our mini stories are built around the most common verbs in the language. If you can get a sense of how the verbs work in different situations, normally that gives you a bit of a core from which you can build the language. Now, today, I'm going to demonstrate what I do on the iPad. I have hooked up my iPad, and it's a bit strange because I'm talking here through the computer, so I have my computer in front of me, yet I'm going to be doing this on the iPad, and I think I'll be tempted at times to poke my computer screen with my stylus or to try and activate what's on the iPad via the computer, because it's a kind of a little bit fuzzy. All right, so I'm going to share my screen, and you'll see that it's my iPad screen, and we will see how this all works out. And again, if you have questions, don't hesitate. Please provide your questions. They are relayed to me, and then I hopefully will be able to answer them. So if all is going well, you should be able to see my iPad screen. And I will quit out of this lesson, and presumably that's working. I'll go straight out of here. So let's go. All right, let's go to the library. This is how it looks on the iPad. I hope you can see it. I am in Persia, or at least in Arabic. I can switch to other languages up here. You know, choose any number of languages that we have. You'll notice that we have Bulgarian and Gujarati. These typically are in the list. These are in order of when I last looked at these languages. So I had a peek at Bulgarian and Gujarati. Bulgarian looks very similar, very easy to understand based on the other Slavic languages that I have learned. But we're not going to go there. We're going to stay with Arabic. And we are going to go to basically where I was. So let's go there. This is the lesson. And so this is the final. I decided, again, because it's fuzzy, I said, okay, I'm struggling with content, and some is too difficult and some is easy. So and then a lot of the content in these books, like the Asimil and others, it's short. They're short, sometimes silly in the case of Asimil, disconnected, short little bits of content. Doesn't really engage you. The Harrops is more sort of at the train station, at the post office, at the museum, that kind of thing. So they're all snippets of content, not really connected to anything. So I said, okay, what I will do, I will go into the last lesson in Asimil and work my way back. And because again, sort of fuzzy logic, it doesn't really matter. It's not like you're learning and you have to do lesson 1 and then lesson 2 and lesson 3 and lesson 4. At the beginning you do. And maybe I should point something out here. So with every lesson you have this is an important, the lesson info, and the same exists on the computer. It gives you some information about the lesson. So there's 160 words in total in this lesson. There's 139 unique words. Every time I read it, I should, and I have tended not to do so, but I'm going to do so in the future, I should give myself credit for having read it a second time and a third time. Similarly with listening, if I'm not listening, if I listen to it in the playlist or here, it will you know, register. But I guess if I'm listening in some other way, which is not being recorded, I should update it. I can see the course. I can add it to the playlist, which I can do. Why don't I do that? I add it to the playlist. And it sort of gives me some information, and it allows me to update whether I've read it or not. And I can also go to the previous if I want. So that's just something I wanted to mention. You also have a little settings button there so that you can decide whether you want the links to go automatic, not automatic. You can change your font size and this kind of thing. Okay, so we go back to the text. So normally what I would do is I would go through this, reading it and listening. Now I get a lot of criticism for the text-to-speech, that it's not very good, and I recognize that. Text-to-speech is not perfect. But here again, in terms of fuzzy logic, I think we have to be tolerant of things that are less than perfect, tolerant of Google Translate giving us a wrong, or even a dictionary gives us the wrong hint, the wrong definition. Some people complain that so-and-so's accent, you know, in every language that I've learned, it seems somebody gets on and says, oh, your teacher has a bad accent, or this is bad. It doesn't matter, because you're not nailing anything down at any stage, and that includes with the text-to-speech. Right now it says that there are 71. If I click, it says links 71 at the top right-hand corner. I could go through my flashcards before doing it, but I tend not to do that. So I just say that is an option. Some people like to do that. And of course I can set, you know, how many at a time, cards per session, 26. I don't like to do 10. I don't like to do 100, but 25 or 26 or so is okay. Sometimes I do go through them ahead of time. Sometimes I go through them, when I go from page to page. Again, fuzzy logic. I don't have a set routine. Language learning, to me, it's acquired through exposure. So the fact that I'm struggling with these texts doesn't bother me, because I know that even in struggling with them, being exposed, it's gradually settling in. If I go back to the beginning lessons and I see words there that I had long ago marked as known and now no longer remember, it doesn't matter to me. Every act of exposure to the language and listening and reading is helping to little sediments are settling in my brain in some fuzzy way that I can't really control. But so what I would do here is I would say, so Darsu Asabia Asabaun. Okay. Now I might, pardon my poor Arabic. Okay. So I haven't seen that one before, but Yaha or something. Now, the fact that all these are in yellow means there are no more blue words. That means that somewhere, sometime long ago, I did this lesson. And I would imagine that most of the yellow words here, I don't know, even though I looked them up. And possibly some of the white words, I don't know. Again, the whole process of learning is not one of cementing in building blocks. It's exposure. So, and I always get a little more nervous when I do this in front of other people. And that's another thing. The more pressure we feel, like here I am talking to a group of people, reading through my text, the more pressure we feel, the more poorly we do. So that's another consideration. So, Al-Mata'allam as-sabur, whatever that is. Al-Mata'allam is learner. So there's elements of that fine. As-sabur. Now, I'm not sure you're going to pick up the sound. I don't know how this works here. I don't think that we will hear the sound. No, the sound, there's no sound. That's fine. So I would simply go through and tafatach ilek al-lugha Arabiya. So opens for you Lugha Arabiya, Arabic language, abwab, alam, doors to a world, Sakhar Jazab. I'm not sure what that means. I would have to look it up. Enchanting, attractive. Okay. So these are words, obviously, that are fairly far along, relatively infrequent words. I have no hope of remembering them, but I have the sense that they will show up eventually. If they show up often enough, they'll stick. I don't really worry about it. Again, if you have any questions here, just let me know. I just want to share with you how I go about, learning using my iPad. And I think it's the first time I've actually showed the iPad. One thing I sometimes do when listening to it, we're not going to hear it, but this one times, I can go slower if I want, 75.75. I can go to 0.5, which I sometimes do with very difficult texts. On the other hand, if I'm going through something that's very easy and very slow, and in Asimil, in the early lessons, they go very slowly, I take it up to 2 times or 1.5 times because it's too slow for me and it gets me through the lesson faster. So these are some of the options that are available. In terms of dictionaries, I personally like context reversal. I find that it's very, very good as a dictionary. Attractive, charming, charming, attractive. Okay, so cancel. That seems to be the correct translation there. I'm just trying to think of other things that I do. Oh yeah, I also alternate between sentence view and page view. Sentence view, of course, has the advantage that you can see each sentence translated. So if I find the text very difficult, I'll go through it all in sentence view. And also, if you're in sentence view, then the advantage is that when you are doing your review exercises, they are limited to the few new words that were on the page. So enchanting, we just had that. And open, or something, I can't remember. Okay, tough, I can't hear it, so I'm not too clear on how that gets pronounced. Doesn't bother me. Jadab is this other, charming, attractive, okay. And I don't change the status yet because it's my first review. It's just exposure. So this is Abuab Alam, doors to the world of, doors of a world. Okay, bingo. Now that takes me on to the next page. And again, I get the translation for that line. And there are no yellow words here, so there are no words to review. Yeah, basically that's kind of a sense of one thing I also wanted to show you. If I go to my lessons, so one of the things that's really great is I have all the material, call it books that I had brought in, you know, different like conversation reports with my tutors, you know, Al Jazeera podcast, the mini stories, and I can go in any of them and go anywhere, beginning, middle, end, and start reviewing, which is a lot more difficult to do in a book. The books are full of a lot of explanations and a lot of clutter, in my opinion. Whereas here, I can go into, say, that Harrop's thing, go into a lesson. I've got the audio, I've got the words, the meaning of the words. I can listen to it, I can review it. And so I have the sense that I'm sort of flying over. I've got this bird's eye view of all kinds of content, some of which I have worked hard to bring in here, like sort of the transcribing of the podcast. By the way, I should report that the automatic transcription company that I was connecting with, and we had problems getting our, I couldn't upload the MP3 file, it wouldn't recognize it. They claim now that they fixed the problem. So theoretically, for $30 a month, I can have 5 hours of transcription of Arabic podcasts. Considering that the average podcast from France 24 is like 12 minutes, or if Al Jazeera is like 20 minutes. So in an hour, I've got, let's say on average, 4 podcasts. So that's 20 podcasts. 5 hours of podcasts transcribed, that's more than I can handle. So I'm going to have some more experience with this. And if other people are interested, I can let them know the name of the website. But considering the tremendous amount of podcast stuff that is out there in Italian, Spanish, French, Chinese, Russian, if we can get this automatically transcribed, that gives us a tremendous amount of learning material. So I think all I wanted to share with you is sort of the sort of fuzzy logic approach that I take to language learning. And so now I'm going to go back to stop screen sharing. And let's see here, take off my reading glasses, put on my computer glasses, and let me know if there are any questions. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Let's see, although are there any? Let's have a look here. Okay, here are the questions. When will you learn Turkish? I can't wait to start into Turkish. My wife is watching, and I sneak in there just to look at it, this amazingly dramatic soap opera called Burned Cocoon in Turkish. And there's just so many twists and turns in the thing. And if I could understand the Turkish, that would be a lot of fun. So I want to do Turkish, but it's not going to be, it probably will be next year, because this year I want to focus on Arabic and Persian. And then because I'm going to the language, the Polyglot Conference in Fukuoka, I just want to give Korean one more crack so that I really have a better handle on Korean. And so Turkish might be the end of this year, might be the beginning of next year. Ok, ese proceso de aprendizaje baseado en input, ¿cómo se aplicar con meus alumnos de inglés? Por ejemplo, algunas actividades. Okay, so the question is, how can you use input-based learning in a classroom? I'm going to answer in English because I'm sure this Mateos de Santana Rodriguez is a teacher of English, so he understands, but I appreciate getting the questions in whatever language. Okay, let's look at some examples. There is a thing that I have been to some seminars where they talk about TPRS, teaching proficiency through reading and storytelling. And there the teacher tells a story in the classroom, tells a story and there seem to be two processes. One is where the teacher kind of acts out the story and writes little stuff on a whiteboard, drawings and stuff like that, so that they're imparting the meaning, so that even though the students may not know the words, they can understand the story. So they are getting a story. And the goal there is to incentivize, to motivate the learner to go out and read. So the other form of TPRS is where the students actually contribute to the story. And so the person says that there was a boy who lived in the forest, and then the student will say he went to pick mushrooms or something, and they go around and add to the story. So these are some of the input-based teaching activities that I have seen referenced. And I think if one Googles CI, comprehensible input, these are all identified as CI type teaching techniques. Those are out there. If it were me, I have no problem with students actually sitting in the classroom and reading. And, if they can develop the habit of reading and maybe ask questions, which reminds me, reading with the help of a teacher is a good thing, especially if the students have difficulty reading. For example, I have difficulty reading Arabic. So the last 2 sessions with my tutor, I have been reading and she has been helping me with my reading. And since some of the Arabic, for example, is supposed to be standard Arabic, there are words in there from the Levantine, from a sort of a Palestinian. This was an interview with a Palestinian man who was planning to run for mayor of Jerusalem. And so he used words that were not standard Arabic, and she was able to explain that to me. And she was also able to help me with aspects of the language that were still fuzzy for me. So reading with people in the class might be something that could be done. I would do it perhaps individually, let people read, and then people can call me over and help them with their reading, for example. If they all read the same story, then you can read for 15 minutes and then spend some time discussing the story, for example. Again, me, and I always refer back to Rubem Alves, who is a great Brazilian educator, and not to ask the learners, questions to prove that they understood the story, not those kinds of things, but rather discussions about what they thought of the story, anything having to do with the story, but not necessarily asking them to analyze or anything of that nature. So I would do some of that. And if there was some way that I could induce them to, obviously assigning reading, I mean, in an ideal world, they would have LingQ, they would have an iPad, they would go away, they'd come back, the teacher would know how much activity they were involved with, which words they had saved. Those words could be used for a discussion in the classroom. So those are some of the ways that I would use it. But I would encourage Mateos to Google CI and see, the kinds of techniques that are used. And if you wanted to do a trial with us with LingQ, we're very happy to set up a classroom-based, trial where just for your group, and we would isolate the group, and we would. Once you have a group, there are so many things that you can do for the group in terms of giving them content which might otherwise not be available, free of copyright, and tracking their activities and so forth. So, okay, James Cook, what tips can you give for teaching rather than learning? It's kind of a similar question. So again, I have to admit, I have not been a classroom teacher. I have taught online. We have groups that have used LingQ. So obviously my language learning, all of my language learning activity is based on LingQ. All the language learning I've done over the last 10 years is based on LingQ. So that's my experience. It's obviously not the only way to learn a language. So, but if I'm going to talk to you about my experience, I will base it on LingQ. But I think the goal of a language teacher today, my view is that it's overwhelmingly one of a motivator, a guide, a stimulator, encourager, these kinds of things. Because the teacher used to be the sort of origin of all wisdom about the language. That's not necessary. There's lots of sources of information about the language. The key thing is to make the learner curious, motivated. So there again, if the student is reading in class and is struggling with something, then the student will ask a question that's specific to that problem, and they're curious to know the answer. So that grammatical explanation has a better chance of sticking than something that's imposed. So my inclination would be to motivate, to help them find content of interest, to create situations where they're curious about something, whether it be about the language or some aspect of the culture. So to stimulate curiosity, and then to encourage. Because, I mean, there's no question that once a learner feels they have achieved something, once we feel we have achieved something, we feel good about ourselves, and we're more inclined to do more of the same. And so that's why tests where you get 5 out of 10, that's very, very discouraging. So I would avoid tests. I think tests are unnecessary. As I said, you can get 8 out of 10 one time, 6 out of 10 the next time. You can do well on your tests. I've mentioned the fact that in English-speaking Canada, good students do well in their French and pass the test, and at the end of 10 years of instruction can't speak the language. So the tests are relatively useless. And instead, the teacher, in my mind, should encourage them to get interested and motivated and stay with the task. All right. So next question here. Do I ever think in another language? Not really. Now, if I'm surrounded by French people, or, you know, French and Japanese, maybe if I'm in that environment, and I might find myself thinking to myself in that language. But, or does this mean when I think in another language, when I speak that language, if I'm speaking the languages that I speak well, I just speak them. I have no sense of, you know, thinking and translating. Is just, and all of the languages that I speak, to the extent that I have developed sort of natural, almost reflex things that I can almost just churn out in phrases, they just come out, and I don't think of translating. And then there are parts where you translate. So in every language, it's a mixture, I think, of thinking in the language you're speaking and translating from English. Okay, fair rate of human rate for transcriptions, I don't know, but we used to have transcription. Yeah, I shouldn't say. I would say that the rate we've been paying for different languages and that I have paid is like $30, $40 US dollars per audio hour. Okay, so, but I saw the translation, or at least the transcription of the sample file that I uploaded, and it was very good. So for language learning, I mean, these are not legal documents. For language learning, I don't see the advantage of paying so much more if I can get 5 hours for $30 instead of 1 hour for $30. It serves my purpose. Where would be a good place to find content for Arabic dialects, specifically Levantine? By link nearly everything in internet. Okay, there is some Levantine Arabic content in our library. My current tutor, Dalia, who has just joined LingQ, by the way, D-A-L-I-A, and there's sort of an underscore, Dalia underscore. Look for her, and maybe I can encourage her to record some more stuff in Levantine. Most of the sort of radio and that kind of stuff is going to be in standard Arabic. But I know that there are TV programs and other things in Levantine Arabic. So I think it's just a matter of following up with people who are in a position to help us with resources. I mean, our Arabic library has grown, and we can add more at Levantine. It's also a matter of demand. So you ask for it, and we'll find ways to get it. And you can also look at some of our members who are from, Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria. If there's a big interest in it, I mean, we should try and build it up. Does Steve think that the evolution of AI will stop people from learning languages because the next 10 years the translation will be extremely good? Okay, now the point is, we don't just learn languages to translate. We learn languages to connect with people. And, I love the idea that I can hear this other language and I can get into the world of that language and the culture and the history in the language. So I don't think, and I've always been able to buy an English book on Ukrainian history or Russian history or Chinese history. I don't want a Ukrainian or an English book on those histories. I want to do it. In fact, one of my major motivations in learning Russian was that I wanted to be able to read Russian novels in the original. And so, and it's also a matter of connecting with people personally. You do it in their language. And so the answer to that is I am not an expert on AI, but I don't think that it'll be a major. I think, if anything, the same things that are leading to AI are making language learning easier and easier. If I look back 10 years ago, if I look back at the evolution of the technology, of the iPhone, iPad, of the ease with which we toss MP3 files around, the way Google Translate has dramatically improved the quality of its translations, the quality of text-to-speech has improved. I think a lot of these things are also going to make language learning easier. Have you had problems with confusing two languages? How to deal with this? Sometimes. The bigger problem is, this is in learning two languages at the same time. No, the biggest problem is that I don't have as much time to devote to one language. There are, I don't know, a surprising number of Arabic words in Persian. And if anything, it helps when I come across them. I sometimes question myself, a similar word like need is lazim, lawzim, different pronunciation in Arabic and Persian. Minor. The sort of confusion element is less important than the fact that I just have less time to spend on the language. Okay, Steve. Řekněte něco česky, prosím. Když jste se učil česky, zapomněl jste toho hodně. Díky. Já jsem se učil česky. You know what? I'll answer in English because my Česky is not so good. But I spent about 8 months to a year, actually, doing a lot of listening and reading in Czech. Went to Prague for 6-7 days, spoke a lot of Czech when I was there. Haven't really spoken it since. But I follow different Czech journalists on Twitter. I can read and understand what they write. Czech is one of those languages that I would just simply have to warm up a little bit. And if I were in a Czech-speaking environment for an hour, I think I would be right back or close to where I was. If I were there for a day, I would be further ahead than I ever was. So it's one of these questions that relates to how do we maintain languages? Well, my top 10 or so languages, I don't really have a problem, but the bottom 10 would require a bit of warming up in order to bring it back to where it was. Okay, I'm into Norwegian. What about Norwegian library? Are you going to try any of the Scandinavian languages? Okay, I think we added Danish. We have Swedish. Again, if there's a strong demand and if there are people who can help us find content, we can add more. If people are studying those languages, I think we have Norwegian. I'm not sure, actually, to be honest. I would have to look that up. But am I going to try any other Scandinavian languages? I mean, it's tempting to go in and really nail down Danish or Norwegian and then say, gee, I speak 2 more languages. But I don't have that much need for that. I can kind of read those languages. And if I were ever in a situation where I needed to whip up, a decent level in Danish or Norwegian, it could be done fairly quickly. So at this point, my interest in doing any other Scandinavian language is limited. Question, do you think classroom will be replaced by the internet? No. The classroom, the internet, or sort of independent learning, and it's not just the internet, it's books, it's audio material, it's all these other things that we can do on our own. Those are very, very powerful. But the overwhelming majority of people study in classrooms. People are used to it. A lot of people need the motivation, the guidance, the direction, the coercion that comes from the classroom. So I don't see the classroom being replaced. I do believe, however, that certainly what I have learned over the last 10 years with LingQ and using resources on the internet, I could never have achieved as much if I had gone to a language school. So for a very motivated learner, I think the classroom is actually a drag. I much prefer the kind of one-on-one interaction 2 or 3 times a week that we can have via LingQ, italki, one of those, find ourselves a good tutor, and then do a lot of learning on our own. I think that's more effective if we are motivated. I'm just wondering why LingQ has Gujarati but not Hindi. Okay. It all depends on what, we had someone very motivated to provide us with Gujarati content. If we find someone who will volunteer to provide us with content for Hindi and Swahili, we'll put them up. We simply can't afford to go out there and try and pay for and generate lots of content in every, it's not every conceivable language. These are 2 major languages, but it's a matter of A, demand, and B, availability of resources in those languages. Okay, at that, I'm gonna cut it off, and thank you very much for listening. I hope I forgot this Japanese one. いつも応援しています。アラビア語についてですが、スティーブさんの次の目標は何ですか? Okay, so sorry, I missed that. In Japanese, so what is my next goal after Arabic? As I said, I'm doing Arabic and Persian. So the next one probably will be Turkish because it's kind of connected geographically, culturally. So アラビア語と今イランの言葉ですね。ペルシャ語の、あと多分トルコ語を勉強したいと思うんですが。Okay, thank you very much. Bye for now.